I'm Lindsay, and I'm an alcoholic. Oh my goodness. I got the privilege of picking Angie up from the airport, and let me just tell you, she was quite a trooper because I've only lived in Texas for about 5 years, and I don't know Houston. I live in Magnolia. I've been to Houston a total of 3 times, and one of them was this conference. Um, There we go. I've been to downtown Houston a total of 3 times, and one of them was this conference, and they had asked me to pick her up. And she was the second speaker of the day that I picked up. The first speaker I picked up from Hobby, I accidentally ended up taking her to the port of Houston. Angie and I fared much better. We made it back to the hotel, and I got to tell you, as I was absolute bundle of nerves. I kidnapped a lady from here, Deborah, that gave me directions and took her with me, and I was just shaking by the time we picked up Angie. And there is something about this lady that I don't know what it is, but she is like human volume. She got in the car, and it was just calm and peaceful, and even though I didn't know my way back, all of a sudden it was okay. And she was the most amazing trooper, and she was just low maintenance, and I was so scared, but she was awesome, and I think that speaks a lot about the kind of person that she is that, we can get lost in traffic. She was hurting. She had had a long day, and it was still okay. And I've got to hear a little bit of her story today at the panel, and I am so excited to get to hear the rest of it. She's an amazing lady, and I'll stop so you can start, hun.
Hi, everybody. My name is Angie, and I'm an alcoholic. I am glad to be here, and yes, she was lost, but I didn't have to speak Friday night, so I wasn't worried about it. I figured as long as we got here before Saturday night, we were good. I'd like to thank the committee for having me here, and I've been having a really nice time here. I just thank the committee so much. To be able to travel around and do service at this level has been nothing but a blessing for me in my life. I'll tell you that I am from originally Greenville, South Carolina, and back home we lived in a little white house on a red dirt road, and we got our water out of wells, and we had an outhouse, and we drank buttermilk and ate cornbread on a regular basis. I'm from a family of Baptist ministers, and they already had my life pretty much mapped out for me. For one, because I had been singing in my granddaddy's church since I was about 3, and they just knew. I remember my father telling me at a really young age that I would have to, get a job singing and take care of my voice because he didn't want to have to work all his life. And I remember getting on my big wheel thinking, well, we'll see. And and like I said, I had flaming red hair and freckles, and nobody else did. And my brother had me hemmed up at the outhouse one night, and he said, I know why you look the way you do. And he said, because the mailman is your daddy. So whenever I saw the mailman coming down the road, I'd be like, Daddy! And I'd run up to him, and he'd put his arms around me and tell me how cute I was. And thank God for the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and sponsorships and the traditions. I found out that turned out to be a little pattern for me, actually. That if you just put your arms around me and told me how cute I was, we'd basically be married at that point. And, so my dad had got a offer to go to Cincinnati, Ohio, and do what he does best. And in the process of traveling back and forth, but let me tell you about my mailman daddy. I was always so happy to see him because there was a lot of kids that didn't get to see their fathers, but I got to see mine every day at 3:30, and I thought, how lucky I was, But anyway, so my dad got a job up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and he was traveling back and forth. And so in the process of traveling back and forth, he found himself a little girlfriend. And he moved us up to Cincinnati, my mother, brother, and my sister, and myself. And he went up to live with this woman and her children. and my father did not have a lot to do with us after that. One of the reasons, and I have a lot of reasons why I'm extremely thankful for Alcoholics Anonymous. One is that, my brother, I had to speak down in Miami a few years ago, and I hadn't seen my brother. He had left from a resentment at my father, and he left Cincinnati in 1978 and did not return. He has grown children that my parents have not seen, and he is mad. And I wanted to see him. I was down there. I called him and told him I would be in Miami. He came and picked me up at the hotel and took me back to his house. And he was mad, like it happened yesterday. And he wanted me to know how he had done well for himself without my dad, And he had this house, really little peculiar house. And, he's like, this is all mine right here. And it's all mine. I worked hard for this right here. And he goes, sit down. You want to watch TV? And I was like sitting in his living room, and the TV was like this. And he said, you need a remote? I was like, no, I think I got it. And I'm almost positive I can turn it on from right here. And he was angry. And one of the cool things about being a member of Alcoholics Anonymous and working the steps and incorporating the traditions into my life is that I don't have to be angry at my dad anymore. You know what I mean? Understanding that he did the best that he could do with what he had. And my brother, and on the way, but he stood in one spot and drank about 7 beers in the short length of time that I was there, because I saw where that was going. And I said, look at the time. Now, take me back to the hotel, please. And we got in, and those things you drive through, like the toll or whatever, and they'll take your picture if you don't pay. Well, that's the one he went through. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, don't you have to? And he goes, smile. And I was like, because they took our picture right at that point, you know what I mean? And he says, smile. And he goes, they'll never do anything. And he's worked for the city of Dade County for I don't know how long. So he's been working down in Miami and doing his own thing, and he's miserable. And I'm grateful that I got a place to come to, people that understand and people that listen, and a process called writing my inventory down and looking at myself. And anyway, so we moved up to Laughlin, Ohio, and it was a small town. And my mother, she worked at a restaurant, and you'll hear me talk about my mother a lot, but my mother worked at a restaurant, and she sent my brother, my sister, and myself to private school. My mother cleaned the restrooms for a living back home, and she was going to see to it that we did not do that kind of work ever. And so we're up here at this Catholic school, and now I got a big red afro, a white blouse, a plaid skirt, and and black and white Spaldings and bobby socks. And I looked at me every day, and I had never seen anybody look like me. And so I was sure it was just me. And so I'm at this Catholic school, and I was just a peculiar kid. I mean, I was scared all the time. And I have to tell you this, though. There was this girl named Squeaky who was like 6'10" in the 5th grade. And she used to beat up all the kids that were different. And so one day she chased me home from school, her and her little posse, and they were throwing rocks at me. And I ran in the house. I told my mother, I said, whew, I'm glad I made it in the house. They was about to kill me. My mother, whenever she sounded like this, I knew it was trouble. She goes, Angela, at some point you got to learn how to stand up for yourself. So, Angela, what I'm going to need you to do is you go out there and you stand up to her. I said, you want me to do what? And she said, or you can stay in here and get the butt whooping I'm going to give you now. I knew what my mothers felt like, and I knew what Squeakies they appeared to be. So I went out into the parking lot, and she was standing there with a little posse, and I walked up to her, and I said, my mother said, that's a lie. I said, my mother said I'm supposed to fight you. And she said, well, come on in. So I balled my fist up as tight as I could, and I closed my eyes as tight as I could. And when I got sober, I really truly thought that this committee, because we talked about this committee that's up in our head, I really thought that only happened to me as an adult. But looking back, it happened to me as a kid, too. Because I had my fist balled up, I had my eyes closed, and over here, this voice kept saying, reach up, just remember, just reach up because she's tall. And over here it's going, she gonna kill you. And back here, you know what I mean? And so I had this conversation going on in my head even then. But I listened to this one over here who was telling me nothing but positive things. And so I put my little pinkies out like this, because when my brother used to box with his friends, he would have his pinkies up and he would rock back and forth like this. So that's what I was doing, standing in front of her. And all of a sudden that voice said, now, and I reached up, I got her right here. It was like the happiest day of my life, man. I had hit the giant. But she didn't budge when I hit her. She didn't move. She just looked at me. I said, "You're getting ready to kill me, aren't you?" And she gave me the big beat down. Now, the whole time, my mother is standing looking out the screen door. This girl is beating me to death. But I got this thing called alcoholism that tells me I should remember what I should need to forget and forget what I need to remember. And when my mother came over, she pulled Squeaky off of me. And when my mother pulled her off of me, I went like this to my mother. She said, "Lord have mercy, let me get her in the house." And the whole way I was like, "I did it. I did it, Mama. I hit her." And from that point on, I believed that I was a fighter. I fought every opportunity I got. My mother, because of what was going on in the city where we lived, in the little town where we lived at, she moved us somewhere else. She got a better job, and she moved us into our first house. They said we lived in the projects, but it was only 2 buildings facing each other. But they said it was the project. It was like 3 floors. We were like, okay, whatever. And so my mother moved us to this all-white neighborhood. And so from the age of 13 to the age of about 21, I wasn't even black no more. I listened to Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band, and my favorite girl group was Heart. And the first concert I ever went to was Led Zeppelin, baby, 1975. But I have to tell you this. Though. I was at the Ted Nugent Foreigner concert, right? And Foreigner was singing Feels Like the First Time. And man, that was 20,000, maybe 30,000 people in this Coliseum and me. And I remember thinking, I am bad. You know what I mean? I thought they're scared to come down here, but it is me with them. And I became a legend in my mind that night. And I hung out with these girls, and these girls were able to do whatever they wanted to as long as they showed up when they were supposed to show up at home. And I remember I was over at my friend Rebecca's house one night, and we were down in the basement, and her mother came down, and she called a family meeting. She goes, "Family meeting," and everybody down there rose up like a choir and went up the steps. So I said, "Well, so I'm going up with them." And so Rebecca's mother says to Rebecca, that's my white woman voice, "Rebecca." She said, "Rebecca, your father and I have been communicating. And we understand, Rebecca, that there's been some alcohol consumption. And Rebecca, your father and I have discussed that as long as you feel the need to drink, we would like for you to drink at home." I said, "What your mother just say?" She goes, "Yeah, she wants us to drink at home. It's safer." I was like, "What?" I remember I went home. I was like, "Mama, can I have a beer?" She was like, "Uh-uh." I said, "Okay, I'm going down to Becky's for a little while." She said, "Don't be late." I said, "Yes, ma'am." And so I hung out with these girls. And one night I was in the backyard, and my friend Rebecca came over, and she had a brown bag with 2 bottles in it. And it was Boone's Farm apple wine. And she, what? Really? That's nice. You know, I speak at my church on a regular basis, and my congregants, when I'm talking to them, and I mentioned that I drank Boone's Farm, they never have that reaction that you just had. As a matter of fact, if anything, they feel a little bit sorry for me that I've drank this stuff all this time and a grape has never been near it. And but we want to call it wine. And so she gave me my bottle, and she said her brothers had schooled her in the art of chugging, and that I was to hit the bottom, twist the cap off, drink it as long and as hard as I could until I couldn't anymore, and then swallow. And that's what I did. And I can tell you that what happened to me did not happen to my friend Rebecca. Man, something hit the bottom of my feet, and it rose slowly through my body. And I made a conscious decision right while it was moving up my body that I'm going to do this every opportunity I got. Because what happened was, I remembered that my red hair no longer mattered. I was funny. I beat Rebecca up that night. You know what I mean? Like, everything I needed to happen happened that night with that drink of alcohol. And so Rebecca, you know, she got sick a little, but me, I made a conscious decision that this was something I was going to do on a regular basis. And I set out to do that on a regular basis. I'm like it talks about in the book. I took the drink took me, alcohol became my master. That is what I set out to do on a regular basis. And my friend Rebecca, now all my friends were going to school doing what they needed to do, but not me. Not me. No, while everybody else was in school, I was over in Sharon Woods with the other drunks drinking, not going to school. Then I began to not listen. My mother made no sense to me anymore. She was saying things like, clean your room, go to school, and I just thought to myself, when I was younger, she just doesn't understand what's going on with me. And I remember she told me, she goes, you cannot drink alcohol and be here. And I remember thinking, I wonder if Becky's family will take me in. And they did. I left there and I began living with Becky and her family. And my mother told Becky's mother quickly, hey, if you can do something with her, that's wonderful. I can't do anything with her. And I started living. But see, what's interesting is that ever since I was a little girl, I really did want to just feel special somewhere. You know what I mean? I sought that stuff out all the way into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I just wanted to feel special somewhere. And over here in this all-white family and me, I was definitely treated special. And I would go to church and sit with them and, sing with them and be there with them. And this is my family because, see, there was something wrong with this family over here. I was better off in this family over here. And I ended up, my dad, I need to tell you, I started drinking and I was hanging out. And my dad said, you need to go to work. And he got me a job at a recording studio. Now, like I said, I've been singing since I was a young girl, and I'm working in this recording studio. And if you're an artist like I am, you just know that the day is going to come when somebody is just going to discover you. 9 times out of 10, I won't even be singing. I'll be sitting at a restaurant, and some guy will come up and just go, hey, do you sing? Say, yes, sir. Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, I do. Well, now, my name's Bob from Epic Records. I got a contract, right? That's how I thought it was going to happen. And so I'm at this recording studio, and I'm singing, and I hit my best Whitney Houston note. And all of a sudden I walk out. There's his brother standing there in a nice suit with a briefcase, and he goes, was that you singing? I said, yes, sir, it was. He said, I can make you famous. Really? He said, all you got to do is come to Vegas with me. No problem. So I went back to my mother, and I had a family meeting. And I said, I will be back for all of you when I get my first Grammy. And no longer will we have to live in poverty. My mother goes, we don't live in poverty. Whatever. I'll be back. And my father always kept things real simple. He would just look at me and go, something is wrong with you. That's basically all he would say to me is something is wrong with you. So I got my little sister going, please don't go. I got my brother saying, please don't go. But I got to go because this man said that he could do for me what I couldn't do for myself. And that's the story of my life in relationships. I turned my will and my life over to you, see. So if you mess up, it's on you. It ain't on me. And so I left and I went to Las Vegas with this gentleman. And I was a young girl in Vegas singing and making a lot of money and having the time of my life. Drinking, blacking out to the point where I know it doesn't happen here in Texas, but waking up next to people that weren't too favorable. And, I remember waking up to this one guy, and both of us looking at each other going, dang! And he had one tooth and it was gold. So I said, at least I got one with some money. And his name was Zeb. And Zeb said, but you told me you loved me last night. I said, Zeb, I tell you, that alcohol, it'll get you every time, won't it? And I hung out, and this gentleman had his own afflictions, and he was going through his stuff, and I began to black out and sing the wrong songs on stage and cry in the middle of songs and just, that whole drunk stuff. You know what I mean? A woman with a lot of potential, but I'm an alcoholic. The only thing that I pay close attention to is my drinking. And what I would do is and they would say things to me like, Angie, why don't you just have 2? Don't drink whiskey because you like to fight on that and you get beat up. So leave the whiskey alone. Just do a little red wine. All the stuff it talks about. It wasn't until I came to Alcoholics Anonymous that I heard that the first drink was the problem. I remember I was sitting at a meeting early on, and this old timer goes, if you don't drink, you won't get drunk. I remember thinking, really? I mean, that's all y'all got to give me here? I just couldn't believe it. The first one is the problem. Wow, okay. But if you don't drink, you won't get drunk. I'll keep that, in mind. I didn't get it. And so here I am losing all these jobs, and finally I got blacklisted in Vegas altogether from any singing jobs. Nobody wanted to work with me because you never knew what was going to happen up on stage. I would show up that first time there and ready to sing, but once I got alcohol in my system, they could be singing, one song, and I'm up there going, feelings. Nothing more than feelings. You know what I mean? And it's like these people came to hear some music they could dance to, and I'm depressed because I'm drinking alcohol. And, they started just blacklisting me everywhere. So we finally got kicked out of the good hotels, and we're living at the Lady Luck. Oh, my God. This thing just had animals that came with it. You know what I mean? And we lived in there, and I was drinking on a regular basis, and he was doing this thing. And one day he came and got me and said that he needed me to drive him to the store. And I got in the car, and I drove him to the store, and what he did was he went in and he robbed the place, and he shot the owner dead. So when he comes out of that building with blood on him and he jumps in the car and he screams at me to go, I went. And just a few short blocks later, I was drug out of the car with pistols held to my head. Now I'm going to tell you, alcoholism. I take that innocent drink of alcohol with my friend Rebecca at the age of 13. And then here I am at 20. Getting ready to go on trial for the taking of somebody's life. That's what alcohol does to me. I will tell you that this gentleman just died about 3 weeks ago in that Nevada prison. And here I am in Houston, Texas, carrying the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I believe why it's in our book. It says, because there is one who has all power. That one is God. The urgency was there. I got kicked out of Nevada. I got a letter from the governor saying, don't you come back here. For no reason. And I remember I left Nevada and I got back to Cincinnati, and I remember I stood in my parents' face and I told them, that's it. No more for me. I'm going to get a job and I'm going to do the right thing. And I meant that from the bottom of my heart. But I didn't know that I was powerless over alcohol and that it dictated what I was going to do. I could say how much I didn't want to drink time and time again, but I have alcoholism. And I'm going to drink until I find a solution not to. So I'm hanging out with my sister and brother one day. On Sundays in Cincinnati, you used to be able to ride the city bus all over the place. It was called Sunday Pass Ride. And we rode it all over the place, and we got to downtown Cincinnati. And we got to the intersection of Liberty and Vine, and I looked over, and there was a restaurant there. And when I looked over, it was brothers, and they had on suits and big old hats with feathers in them. And they were singing Shaft on their little 8-tracks. And I remember my little sister looked over there and she said, boy, you couldn't pay me to go over there. And my brother was like, shoot, me neither. And I was thinking, I'm going over there tomorrow. And I started hanging out in this area with the pimps and the prostitutes. And there was this one guy, his name was Big Milk. This man was delicious. He was just big and he was a pimp. And I remember he would just like be getting ready to backhand a woman, and I would be looking at him like, I hope he asked me to be his girlfriend. See, I have alcoholism. I got a sure up perception problem. Now, what I should have did was just walked up and go, would you just bust me in my head, please? Because I'm not going to make you any money nowhere. And so I'm hanging out downtown, and I'm drinking, and I'm like this young girl in the bars, and I got my hair pulled in a ponytail, and I'm just cute, and I'm drunk. And life is just moving right past me. And one day, this guy, I hung out with these 3 guys. Their name was No Neck, Greasy Feet, and Tie Dye. And they're all in AA now, which is hilarious. But I hung out with these 3 guys, and I didn't really have, other than singing, I really didn't work. And they said, we could teach you a trade that'll be helpful to all of us, And I was like, okay. And so they take me into a department store. They gave me a girdle first, and they said, put this girdle on. Now, what's going to happen is you're going to go over here to this department. You're going to take these outfits, and you're going to roll them up as tight as you can, and then you're going to stick them in the girdle. And I did the first one, and I was like, wow. And I had about 7 outfits going around here. And we left there and went and sold them to this guy, and boom, I had money. I thought, this is brilliant, until I got arrested. Because, see, I was going in people's stores without them, because I don't need to give my money to anybody else. I can do this on my own. But what drunk woman goes into a store trying to steal people's stuff under the influence of alcohol? And I got arrested. And I got to jail, and I took a physical, and I found out I was pregnant. And I just knew that this judge was going to be lenient on me because I was with child. And I'll never forget, I stood in front of that judge, and I was like, Your Honor, I'm pregnant. And he goes, well, then this baby will probably be healthy where I'm sending you to. And he sentenced me to the Ohio Reformatory for Women. And I can tell you that the only reason why I didn't lose my mind is because my child was growing on the inside of me, and I had somebody that I could talk to on a regular basis. My parents had kicked me to the curb by this time. They said, no. You cannot, we can't have this riffraff here. You go ahead and do whatever you're going to do. We got other kids we need to take care of. So I had to call them because the warden came to me right before I was about to have my child and said, you need to find a place for this child to go to or he's going to become a ward of the state. So I called my mother. And I said, Mom, I need you to come up here to the prison. She said, Angie, I'm not coming to visit you in that prison. I said, I need you to come and pick up your grandbaby. And she got silent. And she said, Angela, you have a child? I said, yes, ma'am, I do. And I need you to come and get him. And my parents took that road up to the Ohio Reformatory for Women to come and get their grandchild. And I watched my son leave that prison through a slit this big. And the whole time I'm looking at him, I'm saying underneath my breath, I'm going to get it together. And when I get home, we're going to do all the stuff we do as a mother and child. And I meant that, you guys, from the bottom of my heart. I meant it. When I got my freedom, my son was 4 years old. I got on the Greyhound bus going down 71 South towards Cincinnati, and when I got to downtown, to the bus station, suddenly, if you're new in the room, it's in more about alcoholism. Suddenly the thought crossed my mind. In more about alcoholism, it says suddenly the thought crossed his mind that he could pour a little whiskey in his milk. He sensed he wasn't being a bit too smart. Suddenly the thought crossed my mind that surely one drink won't hurt me. And I went from that Greyhound bus station up to that bar, and I had that drink, and it would be years before I saw my son again. Because, see, I had family that if you were not showing up to do what you need to do, you better have a good explanation or don't you give us one at all. Me being drunk was not a good enough explanation for my family. And not only that, I'm drinking and I'm hanging out and I get pregnant again. But I learned from my last child, this one I'm going to give up for adoption. And I have been working in restaurants trying to do some sort of work because the only thing that I had ever done was sing. And I'm working in this restaurant, and God has always placed angels in my midst. And I'm working in this restaurant, and I'm struggling. I'm coming in. I'm hungover. You know what I mean? The same stuff on I had on when I left. And I remember Tom and Elizabeth. Tom was my manager, and he came to me. He said, Angie, it looks like you're struggling, honey. We're getting ready to open up a new restaurant in Bloomington, Indiana. Why don't you come over there and work for us? And I said, okay. And so we went over there. I set it up with the hospital and everything that this child would be put up for adoption. In the meantime, I'm talking to my sister. I'm drinking the whole time. I need to tell you that I drank my entire pregnancy. My daughter had no prenatal care at all. Until I went to that hospital that night, the only thing that my daughter got into that womb was alcohol. Every now and then, I would eat. But my daughter mostly got alcohol. And, you know, I always said when she just graduated with her master's and from Grambling State University, and she's smart as a whip. I had my son in prison, and I got the best care with him, and he ain't got the sense God gave him. So, you know, it's a luck of the draw, I guess. You know, I don't know. I don't know. And so anyway, I was talking to my sister and told my sister my plans to give my daughter up for adoption. And when you get ready to have the baby, back then anyway, they would throw like this black tarp over you, and then when you had it, they would take the baby without you seeing it. And they took her to the nursery, and they took me to medical. And I remember laying over there in that bed, feeling pain like I had never felt it before. And the phone rang, and it was my mother. And she said, Angela, please bring her home. Don't let some strangers raise our granddaughter. Just bring her home. So I went to the social worker, and we talked and everything, and the couple came in, and I told them that, you know, I had to take my daughter home. And we left from Bloomington, Indiana. We had to go from Bloomington, Indiana to Indianapolis, then to Cincinnati. And I remember I stopped, I got a bottle of whiskey, and I got on that Greyhound bus with my daughter, drinking. And I remember praying all the time, like, God, please just don't let her cry. I don't know what to do. By the time I got to the Greyhound bus station and my parents were down at that station waiting to get to, I was drunk with a newborn in my arms and a bottle of whiskey in the other hand. And my father took my daughter out of my arms and he said, Angie, we got her. And I said, what am I supposed to do? I said, honey, we don't know what you're supposed to do. But she didn't ask for this. And they put that little girl in that truck and they drove off. And I left that Greyhound bus station and went to the bar that I always went to. And I sat in that bar and I drank and I cried about my daughter. I cried about my son. I drank and I drank and I drank. And I'm going to tell you something. A sober moment for me was too painful. It was too painful. I would ask myself questions when I would see people with their kids. What's wrong with me? Why can't I raise my kids? Why can't I get a job and keep it? What's wrong with me? One night I'm at this bar. This guy asked me if I wanted to go with him, and I went to do some other substances with him, and he ended up giving me the bad stuff. And by this time, I'm living on the banks of the Ohio River at a boarding house. And I walked from Vine Street, which is about 16 blocks from the river. And I walked, and I felt like I was going to die. And I remember, if I didn't remember anything else in my past, the one thing I remembered that when things got bad, to call on God. And I was walking and I was sweating from whatever this man did to these other substances. And I felt like I was going to drop dead at any minute. And I remember looking up to the sky and I just said, God, please, I don't want to die like this. I need you to help me. And I got down to that boarding house and it was like everybody that was in the lobby stood still. And there was a little blonde white woman there. And when I opened up that door, she looked at me and she said, honey, you don't have to keep living like this. I said, I'm sick. And I need some help. She went up to my room with me. She put a wet rag on my forehead and she began to tell me about her drinking. She didn't tell me how much she drank, but what she most certainly told me was how she felt as the result of her drinking. And I could understand that. And she said, are you willing to go someplace with me? And I said, where? She goes, I'm not going to tell you. Are you willing to go? And I said, yes, ma'am. If it'll make me feel better, I'm willing to go. And she took me to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, when I got sober, there wasn't a lot of African-American people in AA. Well, kind of like tonight. And I see y'all. How you doing? Power to the people. We can get to bed. It's enough of y'all. We can talk in the corner later on. But keep coming back. It works if you work it. And you should feel real special. You know, don't look at it like, oh, my God, look at all these white people. Don't do that. Just feel special. Just feel like a chocolate chip in the middle of a glass of milk. You know what I mean? And just be special. So she takes me to my first meeting at Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, when we pull up, it's about 200 Harleys parked outside. It's all these white people out in front of this building with white cups. And I said, well, they look like they're having a big old party. So I get ready. We had to walk up this sidewalk before you got into the clubhouse. And all the way, these men are sticking their hands out. How you doing? I'm Big Book Bill. I'm 12 and 12 Tom. I'm Wino Jim. And I'm like, they got some interesting nicknames. But then I'm going up the steps and this big, humongous biker dude grabs me and goes, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Squirrel. I said, Squirrel, you're going to have to put me down, bruh. Yeah, we don't roll like that where I'm coming from. So we go into this room, bunch of people sitting in it. She says, well, let's sit over here because some guy's getting ready to get up and tell his story. So this older white gentleman gets up and tells his story, and this is what I heard, which lets me know still, sometimes what you say and what I hear is two totally different things. But it sounded like this to me. Well, it's been 7 days since I beat my wife. I lost my job yesterday, but I have not had a drink of alcohol today. And it seemed like the whole room stood up and bravo! I said, what kind of stuff is this? So I sat closer to the window in case it was contagious. And then they passed the baskets. I said, oh, here we go. This church right here, I know what this is. And then after he got done, they stood up and clapped, and then they held hands and bowed their. I said, and they hypocrites too. But I stayed around Alcoholics Anonymous because it wasn't like I had a huge social schedule or anything. And I stayed around and hung out and went to meetings. I was like belligerent. It'd be, just everything was because I was black, And there would be 500 people at the coffee bar, right? And I would say, can I get a cup of coffee? And if they didn't get it in time enough, I'd be like, it's because I'm black, ain't it? That's why I can't get my black coffee. Why I got to drink my coffee out of a white cup? Why can't I drink it out of a black cup? So my sponsor, she's from England, right? And she would say things like, would you sit down? And I said, while we on the subject, you better be a little nice to me with slavery and civil rights and all. She goes, oh, really? She goes, who do you personally know that was a slave? I was like, well, I don't know anybody personally. And she goes, until you do, we won't be having this conversation. Yeah, that's the kind of sponsor I had. And let me tell you something. They told me that I had to get a sponsor, and they said, you should want what she has. She pulled up. I was sitting outside. She pulled up in a candy apple red sports car. She had like a Mr. T starter set, rings on every finger. I said, well, there go my sponsor right there. So when she was coming up to walk, I jumped in front of her. I was like, hey, lady, you want to be my sponsor? She goes, I'd love to be your sponsor. Can I drive your car? She goes, oh, keep coming back. And so I started hanging around, and this woman took me to conferences. I was doing all kinds of stuff in AA. But there was one thing I missed that was important, and that was step one. So I'm at meetings. I'm chairing meetings, sponsoring people, never really thinking that I'm quite like you. But just doing this kind of like, because I really didn't have anything else to do. And a few years later, they started coming into, and I don't mean any disrespect, this is my story. Who asked me here? Yeah, tell her. And so they started coming into AA with this little crack problem. What the heck? Why are you so skinny? Why haven't you combed your head? And what is crack? So they were saying that somebody, and they were all sitting back at the back table like this. And I was like, and if one of y'all don't blink, I'm going to lose my mind here pretty soon. So now I done went on this thing now, because I'm self-righteous, right? Now I go on this thing. Them people, crackheads, trying to take over AA. So I'm going to the board of the clubhouse. Yeah, they in here now. You want me to put them out? What you want me to do? Okay, I know what I'll do. I went over to him. I said, I'm going to sponsor all y'all. Don't talk. Don't say anything. They may come up with a Crackaholics Anonymous. Right now, you in AA. We don't talk about drugs. We don't do none of that stuff here, okay? When you're at a meeting, you introduce yourself as an alcoholic. Don't be up there talking about you're a crack addict. They will beat you down. So I started sponsoring them, and, they all kindly just for, whatever reason left. And one day, y'all were talking about God using you as an instrument. I said, you know what? God using me as an instrument, too. He wanted me to bring some black people into Alcoholics Anonymous. So I was sitting at the Wednesday night meeting, and they asked if it was any AA announcements. Old timer said, Angie. I said, look here, I'm going to roll on up out of here. Thank you for the real thick book and everything. And, the coffee and smoking, I hope y'all know that alcohol is bad for you. And I grabbed that book and I left. And on my way out, that old timer said, well, get out of here then. There's people trying to stay sober. We'll see you if you make it back. I was like, Mr. Old Timer, I will not need to come back. And I left out of there, and I said, the first black person I see drunk, I'm going to carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I got on the number 43 bus. 2 stops down, a brother gets on, drunk as he could be. I said, bingo. And I slid over next to him on that bus. I said, my brother, you been drinking? He said, yeah, I had a little something. I said, You might be an alcoholic. And so he started cussing me out on the bus and everything. And, I told him, I said, the people from the AA Club told me that you would probably react like this to my information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it to you the only way that you can probably receive it and the only way that I know how to give it to you. So I opened up that book to chapter 5, told you I'm from a family of Baptist ministers. I stood up in the aisle of that bus and I said, rarely did you hear what I said? I said, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. And the bus driver goes, oh, hell no. He said, you got to get off this bus, sister. And I said, and you, oh, Mr. Bus Driver, are an alcoholic too. And so I left there and I went down to the bar where I knew it was some black drunks at. And I walked in and they were all on the dance floor dancing. But I knew that they were really in pain because I had been to AA. And y'all had told me about the mask that we all wear. So I went back there and I stared at them on the dance floor just shaking my head. I know. So I snatched that the plug out the jukebox, and they froze. I said, black drunks. They got a place for you. It's called the AA Club. You never have to drink again. They said, what you doing down here? I said, well, I graduated. And step 18 says I'm supposed to take care of y'all. Kind of like Moses. They said, girl, if you don't plug that jukebox in, we'll kill you. But I had a relationship with God. I was not worried about you killing me. What I was worried about was you getting the message that's going to save your life. I said, the people at the AA Club told me you would probably react like this to my information. So I'm going to have to give it to you the only way that you know how to take it and the only way that I know how to give it. So I opened up that big book and climbed up on that bar. And I said, rarely did you hear what I said? I said, rarely have we seen a person fail. And the bar owner goes, get out. He said, I'm trying to make money in here. Get out. So he put me out and locked the door. So now I'm standing on the other side of the door reading a big book to the passerbyers. And suddenly, the thought crossed my mind that surely one drink won't hurt me. If you're new in the room, that's the trick of alcoholism. It's to make you think that one drink is going to be cool, although it's never been. But that's the trick. And I knocked on the door. He let me back in, and I went up to the bar, and I ordered a drink. And the bartender said, Angie, please don't do this. And I said, I'm good. I've been without it for a minute. I'm good. I drank that shot of gin, and 45 minutes later, I was in a crack house. Why, that's for them. It's not for me. Why, I'm a PK. That's for them, not me. And I went on a binge, ladies and gentlemen, that was none other than the worst year of my life. When I returned back to Alcoholics Anonymous, I returned back June the 20th, 1991. I was properly horrified and thoroughly convinced I can't drink. My drinking ain't like my brother's drinking. It ain't like my sister's drinking. My brother takes a drink, he gets up and goes to work. I take a drink, I'm on the evening news. That's the difference between my brother's drinking and my drinking. And I came back to that clubhouse with all the shame and the guilt. My hair was matted to my head. I had the same clothes on. My fingernails were black. My stomach was extended out to here. My hands were swollen. And I walked back into that clubhouse, and that old timer that was at that Wednesday night meeting when I made my departure speech was in that coffee bar. And he looked at me and he said, Angie, you're going to die. And I said, I know, and I need you to help me. He reached up on that shelf and he gave me the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he opened it up to the very first page, which is a blank page. And he said, this is what you know about staying sober. This is what you know. From this point forward, you shut up and you listen to what people have to say. And I needed that. I needed that. He said, but before you even do that, I want you to go stand at that door. And you reach your hand out and you say, your name is Angie and you are alcoholic. And I was dirty and I was stinking and I was talking to myself, the whole shebang. And I stood at that door and I reached my hand out to people and I said, my name is Angie and I'm an alcoholic. And based on the way that I looked, people wouldn't shake my hand. We can't get too good in here. Those people that stinking and dirty, who have grave emotional and mental disorders. But it says in the book, it says they too can recover if they have the capacity to be honest. That was me. That was me. Thank God for AA. And then there were those members that when I reached my hand out, some of them shook my hand. Some of them said that they were glad to see me. Somebody offered me coffee. I'm the wrong person to talk to in here if you don't believe that you could get sober and stay sober, that you have to have a house first. I had nothing. Everything I owned was in a plastic bag. But I stayed up at that clubhouse from sunup to sundown. I was there. And somebody would say, Angie, where are you going tonight? And I would be like, I don't have anywhere to go. And somebody would finally say, come on, honey, you can sleep on my couch. And I began to live by sleeping on people in Alcoholics Anonymous couches. I began to work with my sponsor, and she took me through those steps. Thank God. Thank God that I just didn't live in that victimhood anymore, because I found out that victims don't recover. And she took me through the first and the second and the third step. And she opened that book at the third step. When we did that third step prayer, she opened it up and said, this is what I want you to do. This is what I want you to do. Just like it's outlined right here. And I did that fourth step, and I shared that fifth step with her. I was tired. Whatever you tell me to do, I'm going to do. I didn't have a high school education because I had left. I was drinking. I told you I didn't go to school. When I came back to Alcoholics Anonymous June the 20th, 1991, I was close to a wet brain. I had drank so much. But thank God for those 5:30 big book meetings and those 12 o'clock, 12 and 12 meetings. In there is where I learned how to read. Again. Taught me everything. Everything I've learned in Alcoholics Anonymous. And then people sat with me, taught me how to read. Then when I was in my first apartment, I was sitting in my apartment one night, and on my first TV, Sally Struthers comes on, and she goes, you too can get your high school diploma on TV. And I said, bingo. So I went with my sponsor, and I got a money order, and I sent it to this place, and they sent me a science book. And they sent me a history book. And I'm going to tell you something. A closed mouth don't get fed, because I went in meetings and I shared with people what I was doing, and I had a house full of people that were more than willing to teach me this stuff. And when I got finished with the whole course, I took the GED and I got a perfect score. Might not be a lot to you, but it was a lot to me, man. And so that diploma came in the mail December 7th, 1999, and I'll never forget it. I went to the mail and I opened it up. And I held it to my chest, and I said, I'm going to college. And I ran up to the University of Cincinnati, and I was like, who going to help me get in college here? Who is going to help me get in college? And the lady was like, well, what do you want to do? I was like, I don't know. And about this time, they had just incorporated the School of Addiction Studies into the University of Cincinnati, and I will tell you that I now have my degree in addiction studies. May not be a lot to you, but it's huge for me. But I want to tell you about my kids real quick before I get out of here. My daughter is 25. She just graduated, I told you, from Grambling State University, and she just came home about a month ago. At 3 years sober, my parents asked me to step out of my children's lives because they started acting up when I showed back up. And I remember I went to people in AA, and they were like, girl, you got to fight for your kids. You got to fight for your kids. And it wasn't until I went to my sponsor when my sponsor was like, I tell you what, why don't you try doing what's in the best interest of those kids? And what was in the best interest was that they stayed right where they are, because I couldn't take care of them. But I had to see them. And I remember going to my daughter's soccer game, and I would be clear on the other side of the field, sitting under a tree with a baseball hat and sunglasses on, but I had to see her. Sitting at the basketball games where my son's playing basketball, up in the bleacher, way in the corner, I had to see him. And on my daughter's 18th birthday and my son's 18th birthday, they called me and said that they needed to talk to me. And I went in, I picked up my daughter, and we went to the mall. And she spent all my damn money, every single bit. She spent every dime I had. I said, I got to be a little more specific in my prayers. I got to say I want to see them, but I'd like to have a little change in my pocket afterwards. And so on the way from the mall, I'm driving, and she said, you know I can't hang out with you, right? I said, I know. But I was able to clean off my side of the street. And I was able to say to her, well, the day that went by, that I didn't think about her. And that I loved her. And that my alcoholism would not let me be a mother to her. And she said, are you going to be all right? I said, I'm going to be good. I'm good. She said, you got somebody to talk to? I said, I got many people to talk to. And I took her back. And my son, I was able to clean off my side of the street with him. My son was so promising, man. And he's in prison now pretty much for the rest of his life. For making a stupid move under the influence of alcohol. But I'm so thankful that people take meetings to prisons because my son is a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'll be forever grateful. Right now, my mother has Alzheimer's. It's been very difficult. She doesn't, on my 20th anniversary, I went to thank her for being a part of my sobriety, and when I walked in, she was afraid. She didn't know who I was. And I'm so glad that you guys helped me, and she was able to see me sober. And she was able to get to know me. She's having a hard time. We're having a hard time. But I thank the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and God so much that I'm sober and I can do what I can. I'm going to close with this. Back home a long time ago, my grandmother, she would be rocking in her rocking chair and she would sing this song, and I never knew the meaning of it until I was asked to speak at the International Convention. And I remember that Friday night in Toronto, I walked up those steps and I walked up out on that platform and I saw all those alcoholics. And I thought, how do you go from where I was to here? There's one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. And I'll close with this. But this is a song that my grandmother used to hum, and I never knew the meaning of it. And I'm going to close with this. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. See, I once was lost, but now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see. Thank you, Texas.